Welcome to Dory Cote on Shamanism, a weekly podcast that explores one theme in shamanism throughout each month. Get comfortable, have a seat, and let's get started.
Welcome to episode 40 of our podcasts. This topic this week is on when love and compassion become codependence.
Dory, given the title of the episode, what do you mean by love and compassion becoming codependent? How would someone know if they've moved into codependence when they think they're being loving?
I'd like to go back to something that we talked about in one of our prior weeks, and that is the difference between empathy and sympathy, and how love and compassion are very different than sending so much love to somebody that it becomes a codependent response. When we truly love somebody and they love us back, and we express compassion for somebody, it is so vitally important as humans for us to be aware of whether we are damaging ourselves in some way by showering love and compassion onto another human at our own expense. So let's say, for instance, I'll give you an example. Let's say that I have a friend who is suffering greatly because of the loss of a beloved pet. This person is in great grief and requires a lot of care right now. Of course, I'm going to shower that person with love and compassion. I'm going to be present for them. Perhaps I'll bring a meal over to them at some point because they are in such sorrow that they're not able to cook for themselves. I'll send them a card to try to cheer them, to remind them that life does go on outside of the body. All of those are things that are acts of love and compassion for a human who is needing that at this time. However, if I then begin to give up my life to the care of this other person, because this person is struggling so much that she needs somebody to come stay overnight at her house with her. She needs somebody to go do her grocery shopping for her. She needs somebody to do her laundry for her because she's become completely and utterly despondent as a result of the loss of this dear pet. There comes a point where I have to begin to evaluate, am I giving up my life in order to care for another? Am I doing harm to myself in some way? Have I become so codependent that I'm trying to fix this person rather than expressing love and compassion? When you've crossed that line into having either a mental or a heart-invoked sense of, oh, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to make this person all better. She's not going to be in grief anymore because I'm going to stay overnight with her. I'm going to do her grocery shopping. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to take care of it. Then you've stepped, perhaps, into codependence. And that's where you have to stop and breathe and allow yourself to really examine what your own motivations are. Or have you stepped into taking care of somebody else and not letting them step into their own power? Because you've become the power. You've become the answer to their grief. That's where we have to watch ourselves. We have to watch that line and pay attention to not becoming codependent in our love and compassion.
In Sufism practice, they call this sovereignty, that the practice of sovereignty, or the concept of sovereignty, is you must first do no harm to yourself. You must take care of your sovereign self. Mm-hmm. And they use the example of being of service, that you're a hotel keeper, being of service to people that pass through your life. You want to serve them, make them comfortable, give them what they need. But if it's against the house rules and it hurts the house, then that's not appropriate.
I agree with what you're saying wholeheartedly. That's a really great metaphorical way of expressing how we've slipped into codependence when we begin to not take care of our own house, when we have placed other people before ourselves, and as a result we are doing harm to ourselves. That's the trigger, that's the signal of having stepped into codependence.
So what tools can listeners use to spot the codependent behavior in themselves and in others?
There are many ways that individuals can identify within themselves that they've stepped into a codependent behavior. One way is that you, as a person, become so invested in making something right for this other person that it becomes almost like a mission. It becomes like your purpose for living, your purpose for this day. Like that you become a force that doesn't necessarily honor the spirit of the other person. It really becomes more like you have taken over that person's sovereignty, as you were talking about before. You have like stepped into their power. And in doing that, you are overriding their own capacity to care for themselves. So that's one signal. Another is that you begin to resent the person who you're caring for. You're no longer coming from a place of love and compassion. You're coming from a place of, I'm going to do this if it's the last thing I do, but I really, really am not happy about having to do this again for this person. That is when you have stepped into codependence without a shadow of doubt. And you need to step back and reevaluate. Why? What is your motivation? Why are you doing this? And how do you put some boundaries between yourself and this other person who may be manipulating or may just be a very, very needy person, and you have a great deal of love and compassion in your heart, but you also have your own motivations, and your motivations may not be as pure as you think they are. So when you've stepped into beginning to resent, that is a major sign. You need to step away and reevaluate how can you be loving and compassionate without being codependent.
So when the codependent issues come up and we've had to put boundaries around another person, how can we love and show compassion to this person in a safe way, whether the boundaries came up because it was our codependency or theirs? How do we deal with this?
Yes, it is an important way for us to come to some understanding of ourselves. When do we slip into being boundaryless in our love and compassion for others? And how do we recognize that somebody else is being boundaryless with us in the name of love and compassion? And either of those things can happen in our lives. For instance, let's go back to the example of having a friend who on the outside seems to be very, very caring, loving, and compassionate for you as an individual, and showers you with affection and love and caring, whether you're going through a difficult time or not, but is very present for you. And you begin to notice that in this person's presence with you, you begin to feel a little sense of uneasiness that this person is beginning to step over into caring for you in ways that you're not asking for, that you are actually not even wanting. And so this person begins to slowly slip into taking pieces of your life and your own heart self, your own beingness, and is beginning to intrude. And when you have that sense that somebody is intruding, that what started out seeming like love and compassion becomes like pushing the boundaries and feeling a little bit intrusive, then that's where you want to put the brakes on in a relationship and step back and recognize that there's codependence going on here, that this other person is not able, for whatever reason in their own lives, not able to recognize appropriate boundaries in their relationship with you. And so what do you do? What's important is that you don't stop loving or caring for this person. You remember that spark that we talked about, that divine love energy that is in them, that is their spirit. And you continue to love that, and you can continue to have compassion for them. And it is your responsibility to maintain, as you said in a question a bit ago, maintain your own sovereignty. You've got to take care of your own hotel. You have got to take care of yourself and not allow that intrusiveness to take over your life, to take over your own sovereignty, your own way of being. And it might mean that you have to separate yourself from that person, that you have to end a friend relationship or maybe even a family relationship in order to achieve that. That doesn't mean that you don't still have love and compassion for that other person. You have it from a distance. You can still love the core of who that human is. You can still have compassion for whatever might be happening in their life. You can have compassion for whatever has occurred in their life that made it such that they don't understand boundaries. But you don't have to participate in it. You have to take care of yourself. And the same is true in the reverse. If you find yourself in a loving, compassionate relationship with somebody, and you begin to recognize this tendency to push into or intrude into that person's life in ways that are perhaps judgmental or overcommitted or intrusive in some way, then perhaps you really need to take a step back and recognize that you have perhaps another agenda here, which is not about just pure love and compassion, but more about a need in yourself to feel better than or in power over rather than in a relationship that is equal. It's very, very important work, and it requires a deep spiritual commitment and a commitment to yourself to explore your own inner being and what motivates you and what drives you and where are your broken places. We've talked before about the shadow, and I would suggest that any listener who is interested, go back to those episodes in the podcast on the shadow and pay attention to doing their own shadow work, because that's where you will get in touch with perhaps ways in which you are being codependent or others are being codependent with you.
Dory, this completes our prepared questions on the entire topic of love, compassion, and codependence. Do you have anything you want to add at this time?
No, thank you. I feel complete with this at this time, although I do have a sense within myself that we will revisit this topic in the future, and I truly welcome questions, observations, or discussion about this from the listeners.
Thank you for listening to Dory Cote on Shamanism. We'd love to hear your thoughts, stories, reactions, and questions. Come on over to dorycote.com and join the conversation. And tune in next week for more on this subject, or next month for a new subject. You can subscribe to this podcast in iTunes or sign up on dorycote.com to receive notices when the podcasts are posted. That's Dory, D-O-R-Y, and Cote, C-O-T-E.com. Drumming and rattling by Dory Cote and Terry Morgan. Technical assistance and audio production by JillHackett.com. And this is Susan Savelle, wishing you many blessings in your life. We hope to have you join us next time.